Well, let's get into some of the other characters. So we talked about Kenny a little bit. I said I really hope that Anthony's friends get their comeuppance. I'm just dying to see that one kid get smacked around a little bit, the blonde kid, who was really the instigator through all of it. I
Yeah.
think Anthony was in the position of, I'm afraid to look for these people who are bullies to look at me as weak, because it's better to be, what is it? It's better to be the right hand of the devil than the servant of God, I think is the phrase.
Hmm.
If I'm in with the bullies, then I'm safe.
Hmm. Yes. Yeah. That's like that gang protection mentality.
Exactly. And he's
So,
miserable around these people because he's not like them at all, but it's the safest place to be.
right. Right.
So I'm going to be curious to see how that pans out. I would like to think that somehow Anthony and Kenny get past their shit, become friends, but maybe that's the one that won't work. Maybe that's one of those threads that they'll just leave for a future possible show.
I mean, it would be nice to see, and I mean, I feel like looking at those two characters, it could go either way. Because I mean, you saw Anthony reaching out in earnest, trying
Mhm.
to be like, "Hey, I'm sorry," and Kenny wouldn't accept it.
A couple
Now,
times, yeah.
yeah. Now, I mean, would that continue that way, or would, Anthony flip and just be like, "All right, I'm done with," like, because I mean, he's, at this point has gotten into training and he knows. I mean, I'm going to assume by season 6 he'll have been like very proficient.
Yeah.
Is he going to flip and be like, "All right, I'm not going to take your shit anymore," and then the two of them are going to go at it, or is it going to go the other way where Kenny realizes his mistakes and then Anthony's going to be like, "No, I tried to reach out to you.
Yeah.
You put a bunch of rafts around me and kicked me into the pool. Go fuck yourself."
Mhm. Well,
you
do
know, I'm
you
gonna
do you want everything to be wrapped up in a nice little bow at the end, or do you want there to end with some conflict?
I it's interesting, right? Because like the classic Hollywood ending um is always a nice clean resolution, right? That's the thing that's going to please the audiences, please everybody's psyche, make everybody feel good,
Yeah.
right? But if you've ever seen like a movie, a show, anything that goes against that grain, which is like typically it's not anything that's ever, like, to my knowledge, and I could be wrong, anything that's ever been like um super popular or with a lot of money or a big studio or whatever behind it. I've always noticed that in like a lot of like independent films or like smaller shows is that they go for like the unresolved ending, and that's more interesting, because that leaves you like wanting or leaves you wondering. The only As I was saying it, I did remember one comes to mind that was different, was the ending to The Sopranos,
Oh, right.
right? Which is like like from then until the end of time, you don't know,
Mhm.
right? It's just like the screen goes black and you're like, and I remember like even watching it and being like, no, no. But I mean, it's just like that's satisfying in its own way. Like
Mhm.
having no resolution, because you have just like if you're reading a book or a novel or something like that, it's the authors of this putting it in the mind of the reader or the viewer to draw your own conclusion. It's very subjective. It's not the person showing you or telling you this is how you have to feel. And there's really something very like, I don't know if you want to say it's satisfying, but it's way more interesting, because how many discussions since The Sopranos have ended have people had about their theories of what happened, and
Mhm.
trying to find out from like yeah, from people, it's, "Oh, I got the definitive answer. This is what they really meant," and stuff
Right.
like
Yeah.
that, right? As opposed to like if you just have it all laid out in front of you, like there it is. I have the nice, neat little bow. Like I have the closure, and no closure just drives you nuts, but it is way more interesting.
And yet
So
we still don't even know who Carly Simon wrote You're So Vain about. You
exactly,
know? We're still
right?
debating that topic.
So yeah. So I mean, with this show, like it's very, I don't know. I'm very torn between which way they would go. I would like to think, because it's become so popular, that they would and it's become such a thing that they would go with a resolution. Unless they because this show is like at the end of every season, they have some kind of like stinger, right? They have something that's just makes you like, oh, I can't wait for the next one. I can't wait for the
Yeah.
next one. Kind of like the end of like a Law and Order SVU episode, right? This is like this really they leave you just ten kind of dangling in the air. And even though it's not a continuous storyline, you can't like wait to see the next one because there's
Right.
like no real resolution. So I mean, will they go for the resolution and this is the end of the series, or will they leave it open ended like, this is the thing that's just going to keep going on and on through generations and generations?
See,
We don't
I
know.
think they'll wrap up the majority of it, but I feel like they're going to leave a couple of things a little bit ambiguous.
Yeah, a couple little nuggets,
Yeah,
you
and
think?
I have a feeling Anthony and Kenny might be one of those things. Because the other factor, like I mentioned earlier, is Leah. You know, none of the kids from their school were shown in the last season at all. All that
Mhm.
stuff happened previous to the last season. So I think maybe there might be like a little bit of a Johnny, Allie, Daniel love triangle that goes on between the three of them that might keep
Hmm.
them a little bit distant. It's hard to say, but I think if there's a lot of potential for that relationship to go either way. So I think that might be the one that they kind of leave if they have any intention of doing a spinoff or something like that. Who knows? But I think everything else will get resolved. I think Miguel, Johnny, Kreese, I think all that stuff will get resolved.
Yeah, I think the only way that they would leave something open ended, or not the only way, but one of the only ways is if they do decide to do a spin-off, which that could come with some mixed results. Because I
Yeah.
mean, you could give like Hawk his own show, right? You could give um Anthony Jr. his own show, like when he goes to college, so this way like Ralph Macchio and all them don't have to be involved, right? They just
Right.
start a whole new cast of characters. But when you see a spin-off from an already existing show like that happen, and we've seen through since the beginning of time, it's like very mixed results, right? I mean, Three's Company was great. Three's a Crowd, not so
I was just
much.
going to say Three's a Crowd, the Ropers, the MASH spinoff.
Yeah,
I can't
yeah,
remember what that was called, but yeah, they had the one with Harry Morgan and Klinger and all that working in a hospital.
right.
That did not
But
last very long. It's risky.
I mean, then you have Cheers and then you have Frasier, right? So
Did you
sometimes it
hear
does
that
work.
they're bringing back 8 or 9 episodes of Cheers with Woody and Ted Danson?
Holy cow.
Yeah, I just saw that last night. I don't know if that's an official thing or if that's something that
Wow.
somebody just posted, but keep your eyes out that because supposedly that's coming this fall. So we shall see.
But I mean, there's
Remember when Diane worked here? It's going to be a great show.
it's just like we still work in a bar and we're 70.
Right. Yeah.
Um but I mean also, I mean, I think that the landscape has changed too. I mean, with streaming and with being able to binge watch things, put together episodes, shows, like just so many ideas being able to get out there. It's so different now that maybe taking a couple of these characters and doing like a spin-off or maybe a loosely related spin-off could work and turn into its own thing. Who
Sure.
knows?
I mean, the actors and the characters are all dynamic enough to be able to do it. It comes down to writing interest. I think they've built up enough to be able to pull it off if they want to. It's just a matter of whether they go in directions that people enjoy enough to keep it going.
Well, I mean, that's also depends too on a lot of these the principal actors now. I mean, like the older ones, they're the legacy characters. I mean, my guess is that they would be relying on their legacy, something they've already done years later, to
Yeah.
kind of make a living, for lack of a better word, right? All of the younger actors, maybe some of them don't want to be typecast. Maybe some of them, I know that some of them just like graduated high school, right,
Right.
and maybe want to
Mhm.
go on and do other things besides acting. So I mean, it's really dependent on. It's just like if, say, the kid that plays Hawk or Anthony, right? Do they want to keep going with this and like parlay it into like a living, or do they want to do something else with their life? Does Hawk does the actor that plays Hawk want to be known as Hawk forever? Does he want to play
Right.
him on a
Yeah.
series for the next like 5 years, or
Mhm.
does he have other aspirations, either in film or in life or whatever.
Right. Yeah, that's
Um,
true.
because I mean, my take would be different because at our age, like if I had a chance to have like 5 or 6 seasons of something and invest and parlay that money and then be like, hey, I never have to work again, I wouldn't do it. But I'm like twice their age, so it's
Right.
like
Yeah. Exactly.
that, like, how does one deal with that when you're like in your early 20s? Like, I mean, if I were them, I'd be like, I'm retired.
Well, and it's interesting too because I don't know if you do. I listen to some of these '90s shows, rewatch podcasts, and I'm listening to them,
Mhm.
and I feel like sometimes they're grateful that they stayed in it, and sometimes they wish they hadn't, and sometimes they wish they didn't have their first kiss be on screen in front of 500 people and 2 million people watching it, and that
Right.
sort of thing. It's like such a toss up. You just make the decision that you make, and it turns out the way it turns out.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think in that way, it's probably not so different.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think that, I think a lot of that really depends.
Well, speaking of things working out, I have this feeling that I don't know if it'll be the very opening scene of the next season, but I feel like there's going to be a scene where Chosen is in the hospital, after being all sewn up from being slashed with a sword,
Hmm.
and Kumiko is there at his side.
Hmm.
Because remember, he called her and said, I want to see you. He was very drunk, but he was very obviously interested in her in that message. And I'm sure she'll pick up on that if she doesn't already know, because women tend to have that. They know.
Yeah.
I feel like she's going to come back for the last season and they're going to connect.
Yeah, I did forget about that because that was kind of a side story,
Mm-hmm.
subplot. Um, yeah, I mean, it wouldn't really be out of pocket really because I mean, to be like, oh, she flew all the way over from Okinawa.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's just like it's nothing. These people go
Yeah.
back and forth. It seems like it's nothing, right?
Right. Yeah. It's got to be like a
Um,
$1,600 trip.
but yeah, but that kind of stuff doesn't matter in the storyline, right?
No, money doesn't
Um,
seem to be an issue for anybody. Like even when Johnny only had one class and three students, he seemed to be able to do okay for himself. Like he was
yeah,
paying his rent, and I'm sure car insurance on a sports car wasn't cheap. And
yeah,
who am I kidding? He
especially
didn't have insurance.
exactly. Yeah, I'm sure if he got pulled over, he would have been in a boatload of trouble.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I think that's a definite possibility.
Mhm.
Um, I think one thing that we're not like speaking of going back to the the old country or whatever they call it, like wherever the new tournament was being held, like
Mhm.
what happens to that instructor, to that woman, and like the whole competition? Like, does she play a bigger hand? Like, does she become the new villain? It seems unlikely because it's just like this little karate competition like in Reseda Valley is kind of like, okay, this is like one little thing here and she's global,
Right. Well, I think that
right?
was the thing, was trying to get into that tournament was going to get her family's legacy, sewn into the world by becoming part of the biggest karate stage.
Right.
But what was interesting is that at the end of the fight, when Daniel beat Silver at the end of the last season, and I was really disappointed in that fight, by the way. I just thought that was like Daniel won that fight before they even started. The music said he won the fight because it was all upbeat. There was no stress or challenge in that whatsoever.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, Chosen took him down a peg already, but it's kind of like when somebody loosens the lid of the jar and you just come in and open it.
Yeah.
You know? But she
Yeah.
she kind of like just slunk into the background and you never saw her again. So you really don't know what happened to her at the end of that because she wasn't outside of the building when the cops were there and was interviewing people. And she just kind of like, after Silver got his ass kicked, she was just like, yeah, I'm gonna fade into the background. Like that meme when Homer just floats back into the
I was
tree.
gonna say, yeah, it's like when
That's
Homer goes into the bushes.
Yeah, that's exactly what she did. She just kind of disappeared into the background and you didn't see her after that.
Well, I mean, she's probably like, screw you people. This isn't my fight. Like I'm
Yeah.
I'm out of here.
Well, I mean, her boss just got his ass kicked and she watched all the students quit. So,
Yeah. So she's probably like, well, bye, next plane back to Japan
Right. Yeah. But
or
she still
something.
has the opportunity to do what she wants to do.
Yeah.
But now she has no students. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's gonna be interesting to see like if and how that plays out.
Yeah. The other big question mark is Tori, because when they showed up at the Cobra Kai dojo to go to into the office and get the computer information, they looked at Tori and they said, "What are you doing here?" And Samantha was like, "She's here with us, at least for what we're doing now." But she never trusted Silver. She's completely lost trust in Kreese because he let her down with the scheming that they were doing when he was like, "Just take care of you now. You can't help me anymore." And
Yeah.
you know, uh, does she join Miyagi Do? What does she do? She's a good
Yeah,
fighter. Why wouldn't they want her?
right, right. I mean, yeah, she's a wild card. I mean, I would like to think that the way that the character is going is that she's basically lost faith in everybody that is evil. So she would naturally go to the side of good.
Mhm.
But there's also kind of that, the cynical her cynical nature. Um, does she keep being that type of character that's like, "No, I can't trust anybody. All I can rely on is myself." I mean, honestly, that's just that gets really tired.
Yeah. And it's
So,
tiring. I mean, to live life that way is exhausting as well.
yeah. Yeah,
But there
so,
is a bit of a an open ending for her because we know her mom is ill. But remember, her aunt is just sitting around waiting for her mother to die and take over their money and all
um
that. So I feel like somewhere in this season, her mom's going to die. She's going to have to deal with the aunt, and that some whatever happens with that is going to determine who she is
mhm.
and what she does. But they kind of, I mean, they haven't talked about that in a while. But I feel like this show is really good at closing loose ends. And that
Yeah.
was kind of a thing that they just left hanging and you forgot about. And I feel like that's going to come to fruition at some point. I think her mom's going to die in this season.
Right, and that's the thing too, is like, you brought up a good point of like, of loose ends is like, I think that they for the drama and the surprise, they have those things that they introduce, and then later on, it comes back when you're like, "Oh, yeah, I was so distracted with all this other stuff, the main plot points, I forgot about this thing that happened," and that plays into the character's decision, the direction they're going in.
Right.
Um, as opposed to who knows, maybe Miguel's asthma is going to come back in season 6. We don't know. Oh
He's
yeah, I
gonna
forgot.
he's gonna cough and slip back into his coma from season 3. But
But
it so going along with that, Devin Lee is also kind of a wild card because now
mhm,
she knows the truth. So what does she do? Another great female fighter. Because remember, Miyagi-Do has only one female fighter.
mhm.
And if they're going to be in this world stage, I kind of feel like they're going to need a couple more women to balance out the team.
Right, right. Yeah, you don't want it to just be a sausage fest over there.
Right. And I don't think it can be. I think that they're going to be a very well-rounded tournament. And so I feel like they need Tori and Devin on the team to really make that fight work. And I don't think they've considered that yet.
I mean, I think that she's yeah, I mean now well, I mean there's a lot of questions in the air too because she's one of those characters that, really believed in Cobra Kai and was kind of a ruthless fighter the way she was. The girls were pitted against each other because of that. Now that I think it all depends on like now that Silver is exposed and Cobra Kai is essentially done. What does that mean for those characters? Like, is that? I mean, I think it would be too easy to assume that like all of a sudden everybody's just like, "Oh man, that was a scam." Well, now we're friends. Like people are like
Right. Yeah.
people are more complex than that.
Right.
Because I
Yeah.
mean, it's just like, Yeah,
Yeah,
well, he
like
was
Kyler's not just going to be like, oh, I guess we're all friends now, and Hawk and
yeah,
Dimitri are going to be like, no.
yeah, oh, I guess I'm not a dick anymore, right?
Right. Yeah, we
Um,
got years of shit to resolve here.
right. I mean, that's the whole point. This is like there's
Yeah.
interpersonal relationships between people. There's like, hey, like Silver lied to us, but you still kicked my ass, and that's
Right.
not okay.
But
Um,
where are they going to go? Because remember, Silver was like slowly taking over all the dojos in the area. So if they go try and go to one of the other dojos, who apparently, by the way, aren't going to know this happened right away. So, like, do those dojos still exist? I mean, they
well,
only really
yeah,
focus
that's
on one class of every dojo.
yeah, and I mean, yeah, exactly. And that's the other thing too, is like you don't take into account like and I mean it would probably be too much um to work into the story. It's like
Yeah.
for the sake of argument, you have Miyagi Do or Miyagi Fang or whatever the hell they're calling it now, and then Cobra Kai, and that's it. There's like no other operating dojos like in a 30-mile radius,
Right.
right?
But yet you go to the tournament and there's like 18 teams that are up on the board and
Yeah, and it's
all
like
these places you've never heard of. Yeah.
yeah, and it's like, and what about them? But I
Right.
know it would be way too involved to like put all those people in it. But it's just funny when you're just kind of like, oh yeah, like I wonder what all these other like small businesses like are thinking about. Like, there's some guy that just wants to like make a living and
Yeah.
teach kids karate, and there's like no drama, just like in real life, and
Yeah.
like
Right. Well,
and
just like I've only been practicing for 6 weeks, but I made it to the semifinals in the tournament.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I mean, there has to be a suspension of disbelief.
Or
So
yeah, there is that element that you did, but it's like that with everything. I mean, if you watch the Da Vinci Code and you see Robert Langdon is solving hundreds-year old mysteries in 2 hours, and not just one, but one after another, or Angels and Demons, where he does that, and it's like you just have to. Which I have a difficult time with because I'm more of a realist, but you
yeah,
just have
yeah.
to kind of let all that stuff go and go, all right, this is just the way the world works.
Well, yeah, I mean, you do. I mean, when you're, and that's one thing that I don't know, maybe I've kind of forgotten. I mean, it's as I've gotten older, watching like movies and TV, it's fun to poke holes and see the continuity not be there. But at the same time, when you're involved in watching or consuming any type of media, there has to be a suspension of disbelief when you're watching
It
it,
doesn't
because
work.
well, yeah, you're not watching real life. Um, I mean, you're watching it and you're taking it in, and like you're enjoying it, and there is a certain um, I don't know how to say, not an art, but I mean, for lack of a better word, there's kind of an art to being like a consumer of that and just being like, oh, that could never happen, or it's just like, oh, that
Right.
you know that plot hole here or that hole there, and that's also like what when you're consuming media is one of the things about movies and TV is like it reminds you that it's not reality. Um,
And
finding
I
it,
don't mean to be that way. It's something that I just naturally pick up on. I remember the first time I remember doing it was when I was in the theater watching Die Hard for the first time.
yeah,
And I'm like, wasn't his shirt dirtier a minute ago? You know,
right,
and
right.
I just it's just one of those things. I don't try and pick things out. I just identify them. And it drives me
Right.
nuts.
Right. And I mean, and yeah, and for some people it's fun, for some people it's not fun because it takes you out of it. But being taken out of it is also can be a fun experience as well. But I mean, the basically it's like yeah, we could go down these rabbit holes of just being like, oh, okay, like it just I think we were talking about on one of the other episodes we did on this. It's just like, okay, so like Kreese and Silver want to like make Cobra Kai, like they want to indoctrinate everybody and like make them like the biggest dojo in the valley and then in the world. And it's like that, all right, so why? Then what? Like for to
Right.
what
Yeah.
purpose? Like, I mean, are they gonna start like a genocide or something? Like what is there like with all these soldiers, like, or is it for money, or it's just like what has to be gained, you know what I mean? It's like
Right.
it seems like a very unrealistic, like, we're going to be the biggest dojo in the world. It's like, all right, first of all, not possible.
Right. And if
uh
everyone's fighting like you, who are you fighting?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
You
And
know?
so yeah, when you go down those paths like that, you're just kind of like, okay, like I don't understand it. But if you sit there and you buy into it and they're just like, we're going to rule the world, and you're like, yeah, and then you just don't ask any questions after that, then you can enjoy it and just move on to the next scene.
Right.
And sometimes you
Right.
have to do that.
Yeah, and it is that's one thing that I do find difficult for me is because those things it's really hard to make them not linger in my head somewhere,
Yeah.
you know?
And that's gonna be a that's gonna be a curse.
It's just like okay, so take the Tori thing with the ant, right? It's like ever since that scene, I've been waiting for that aunt to show up. I've been waiting for something to happen to her mom where she goes in the hospital and the aunt's just like ready to pounce on the money or she's already
Yeah.
taken them to court or whatever. Like I've been waiting for that moment ever since I saw that scene. So it's like those things typically stay somewhere in my head,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
But that's how I started doing beta reading for books because I found those continuity errors a lot. And you know, when an
Mhm.
author's like, "Hey, I want to release this book. I need some people to read it. Tell me what's not connected or what you know what I forgot or what doesn't work or whatever." And that's how I started doing that work was because I was able to find those kind of things.
And I mean, I think that don't get me wrong, I think that's important too. I mean, you have to have continuity, you have to have things make sense. Um, I think in art, it's like to an extent because
Yeah.
you can't. I mean, like what you're doing is right. You're looking for in that case, making sure that everything flows smoothly and makes sense, right? But if we're talking about a show like this, it's like how far do you go?
Yeah.
Like how many
Yeah.
different avenues do you go down to like because you could have like hundreds of different people tell you like little like pull at little threads before you're like all right we can't tackle all of this.
Right. Yeah.
So
That's
it's like you
very, very
gotta
true.
yeah, you gotta draw the line somewhere. So it's like, in this case, I am happy to I mean, it's a very over dramatic series.
Mhm.
It's very, very drama. It's very soap opera. So it's like, I sit back, relax, and I enjoy it for what it is. I don't try to question it too much.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that it's something that you do have to just try and enjoy and not think too hard about. Like, why is Johnny so dumb when he was a pretty intelligent teenager? You
Yeah,
know, like all of a sudden he just seems like he's gone the Homer Simpson route and he's just getting slowly dumber through some of the episodes. Like,
exactly.
I'm pretty sure you're smarter than this, unless you just did I know you partied a lot, but did that
Yeah.
include a lot of marijuana or
Well, I mean, I think it's funny because you think about it, and like his character specifically is like, yeah, he what they kind of positioned him in the first season of like, okay, he never really progressed mentally after the 80s. He just kind of stayed this kind of like this unsuccessful jock type of guy who's taken odd jobs and he's bad at technology and his mind is just stuck in the past. He listens to Whitesnake. He doesn't know how to operate a cell phone. Like after a while, they use that as kind of a butt of a joke. Where when he's doing Uber, you're just like, oh my God, Johnny's doing Uber. This is going to be great, you know.
right?
Um, right and it's just like it's one of those things where they just kind of build it into the character for not only like a comic relief because you're just like you know oh that Johnny like we said at the beginning of the episode but also there's kind of like a on another level our generation like the Gen X generation or before can kind of like relate to that mindset like not necessarily not like being dumb and not knowing like I mean we all know how to use a cell phone
Right.
right
Yeah.
we would all know how to use Uber so it's not really the fact that like he doesn't know how to do it but it's like we kind of get the gist of what it is just like oh I wish you know things were the way they were you know my mind being stuck in the past there's that kind of stark contrast between the generations between like being an old fuddy-duddy who's just like yeah well what's Twitter and then like you know the Gen Z's being all like up on top of everything so it's not really um like if you look at it in a broader context right it's like not really the things that Johnny is dumb about. Like, you know, you roll your eyes and be like, come on, who doesn't know how to set up a cell phone, right?
Right.
This
Yeah.
is just like it's comedic relief, but it's also kind of like to our generation, kind of like being like, ah, yeah, just seeing like the contrast of like Dimitri trying to help him set up his cell phone and everything, and being like, you've been like, we feel like we've been in a situation like that before, not maybe that one, but
Right.
that one. And
Yeah.
that's, I think, another way, like a subtext that we kind of relate to the show on, aside from it being really nostalgic from being based on the first movies.
Sure. Yeah.
So
I
that's
think
how I take it.
the one part about that though that I thought was a little bit inconsistent was when he was getting the crap beat out of him at Silver's house and he sees the sonogram, he's like, I need to survive for my family. When he found out Carmen might be pregnant, he's like, what do I need to do to baby proof my apartment? And he gets the video and he's like, what do I need to do for my family? And the reason he took the Uber job was because of his family, but he didn't take that seriously.
Yeah.
And that was the one thing that was kind of out of his character. Like if he brings it when it comes to whatever he needs to do for his family, it was kind of inconsistent that Uber was like a joke to him. Like, another 1-star rating. I'm just
Well,
gonna
I
eat
mean,
your taquito, and tell
well, I
you I
mean,
did it.
well, I mean, there was like Uber or DoorDash or whatever he was doing is one thing, but like him like being serious about like when he's getting his ass kicked and seriously facing possibly getting killed, I could see how motivation for his family might be a little bit more at
Sure.
that point, because it's like if you're Ubering and somebody's going to be 1-star rating, that's not life or death. Like
Well,
Terry
but
Silver ready to slash you with a sword, that's life or death.
that is, but I go back to thinking about him cleaning up the apartment, and he gets on YouTube and looks up the video, and they're like, you need to
Yeah.
do this and this and this, and he's just on it, and within a couple of hours, his apartment's completely transformed because he's doing that for his family,
Yeah.
and he did the Uber thing for his family. So that just was a little bit out of character for me that he was so blasé about it when that's the one thing that seems to bring him to be serious.
Yeah. No, I get it. Yeah, I think again it's probably for the more for the comic relief, and if you
Yeah.
take it at face value, you just kind of chuckle at it or whatever and just be like, "Oh, okay." But then when you dig into it, you're like, "Oh yeah, I guess it's not
I
very."
think that goes more to show how ridiculous my brain works as opposed to the writers of the show.
Yeah, yeah.